did you, I mean, for those people who don't know you, don't know your work, a lot of it's being shown on the screens behind us, how did you get started in photography?
I actually started shooting for the local newspaper when I was in high school. I was on the swim team, and the sports editor had to shoot his own photographs, and he had a terrible time shooting swimming. So I showed up one day with some of my images, and he hired me as a stringer on the spot. So I learned, I was at the time one of the only juniors in high school who had a pass to get off campus during the day. So I realized photography immediately had some perks.
So what was the first time you realized this is something, and this is something that I could do for a living, something I want to do for a living?
I think at that point I just really enjoyed it. I wasn't sure if that was something I wanted to pursue later. I attended the University of Missouri School of Journalism, and one of the great things there is they had programs in news editorial, photojournalism, advertising. So I figured I'd kind of see what I loved, and I just really fell in love with photojournalism while I was shooting for the school newspaper. Mm-hmm. So it's been fun because it's like every day is kind of a new experience.
So I work with a lot of photojournalists, and some of the people that I find most interesting to talk to and to shoot with, because they tend to approach photography in quite a disciplined way. And what were some of the things that you learned?
Well, I think the big thing you learn as a photojournalist is to anticipate something that's going to happen. And that's probably the difference from what I'm doing now in terms of structured, directed portrait shoots. But it's a great background to have where, like, even when you go in with a plan today, it's like watching for that spontaneous moment that will happen and being nimble enough to jump to a better photograph when you see it. So I think photojournalism was great training in shooting sports and you know, having a wide range of subject matters to photograph.
Do you remember the first time you got published?
Well, my first magazine photograph is actually in this deck as we go through. It was a photograph of Billy Martin at Thurman Munson's funeral, the Yankees catcher who died in a plane crash, and the photograph ended up in nearly full page in Life magazine right as I was starting journalism school. So I guess maybe at that point I was really kind of hooked.
So you must have seen a lot of, over the course of your career, a lot of changes technologically as well as just in the industry. I mean, what kind of camera gears do you start out with?
You know, it's funny today where people have become so spoiled that they're, you know, oh, 10 frames a second, really this other one does 11. The cameras that I was using when I won a Pulitzer for covering the 1984 Olympics, if you were lucky with fresh batteries, you might get 3.5 frames a second out of the things. And that was really like if you had just changed the batteries before that roll of film. So it's changed dramatically. I think, you know, one of the great things that's happened is people now have immediate feedback to what their images are, which, you know, we didn't have at the time. It's like, you know, when the shutter's up, you miss the moment that you're shooting, and now being able to see that and realize if you caught it or not right away is great feedback.
So you're the son of an engineer.
I am.
From Iowa. I've done my research.
Uh-huh.
And what do your parents think about your choice of career?
At first, my dad encouraged me. He did mention that I could get a degree in engineering, and that John Deere tractors did have photographers who worked for them. I was kind of thinking taking photography in a different path, but he was noble enough after I won the Pulitzer to say, thank God he didn't follow my advice, or he would have been an engineer. So
I think that's fair enough.
Yeah,
once you've won a Pulitzer,
we're good at that point. So.
So what would be, in an ideal world, what would be your perfect camera gear?
Perfect camera gear, it's like, I want a great lens and I want a great sensor. You know, the technology now has gotten so great with mirrorless that actually one of the things that I really love about the Sony E-mount system is it was always that dilemma before. If you shot Nikon, you would see a Canon lens you wanted to shoot, or if you shot Canon, it's like, oh, this favorite Nikon lens, or, you know, oh my God, it's like Leica's got a great lens. And you didn't want to have all those bodies. And the great thing now is I literally have, I think, 6 lenses in the range of 85 to 90 millimeters, and I can really fine tune it depending on the look that I want. So I think the great thing about E-mount is it's almost a universal lens mount, which lets me, I like to get it, even though I do a lot in post-processing, it's like if I can create the look in camera, depending the lens that I select, there's just that much less that I have to do afterwards. So to me, that versatility is great.
So I speak to a lot of photographers that value mirrorless, for more than one reason, but one of the reasons they value it is the relatively lower size and bulk.
Yeah.
Which means they find that the experience of being photographed is less intimidating for their subjects.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is that reflected in your experience?
I would totally agree. I mean, first off, it's like, it's funny. It's I think probably photographers of my era are the ones who really have embraced it, because it's like, oh my God, it's like my shoulders actually are not aching at the end of the day. I've done shoots where when we did the book Art and Soul, we would sometimes shoot 20 to 30 portraits in a day. And, it was a great experience, but at the end of the day, you kind of felt like you'd gone, 10 rounds with Mike Tyson. And now I don't feel that way. I mean, it's, certainly it's the less weight helps a lot, but I think you also touched on something that I hear lots of photographers say. It's like, well, if I have this smaller camera, will people realize I'm a professional photographer? And my feeling on that is, God, I hope not. Like, I love being able to go out in the streets and not cause a lot of attention or have people notice me. I think Henri Cartier-Bresson, people never realized why he hated to be photographed. And his son-in-law is, a former son-in-law is a good friend of mine, and he said that actually the reason he hated photographs of him is he didn't want anyone to recognize him when he was out on the street. He wanted people to think he was just, in his own words, an old man with a camera. So I think, the less innocuous, smaller, less intimidating, to me is a huge benefit.
So let's talk a little bit about the portraiture. I mean, it's probably what you're best known for at this point in your career. And you photographed an enormous range of people from, celebrities to politicians and everything in between. How do you connect with people like that, who you might not necessarily know beforehand?
I think that's a great question, because I think, to me, that's the most important part of a portrait shoot, is making that connection. So many people ask about, like, lighting and props and, what camera and lens, but it's really, it's forming that connection and drawing something out of their personality. I think if you can show people an aspect, you have an advantage with celebrities that people already kind of know something about the subject. So in a way, to me, it's kind of fun to either, you can either play up what people are expecting or kind of surprise people with something they may not know. And I think either approach is good and valid. I tell people a lot, it's like the difference between shooting celebrities and regular people, because it's a lot of the magazine shoots I have are somebody who may never have been photographed or in a magazine before, and I love those too, is I kind of take the opposite approach on both. If I'm shooting a celebrity, I try to treat them just like regular folks, just like ordinary people, and relate to them, on that basis of who they are, not what they've done. And then when you're shooting regular people, that's your chance to make them feel like stars. So, treat stars like they're regular folks and regular folks like they're stars.
So I imagine with a lot of the celebrities that you photograph and the politicians, you probably don't have a lot of time.
No.
I mean, how do you break the ice with people? How do you quickly break that down?
It's like usually trying to connect with them on something they don't get asked a lot. So kind of, you did your research today. A lot of times I try to do the same sort of thing and look for maybe that thing that jumps out at me. It's like I'm not really looking at their filmography of every work that they've done, but I know when I photographed Dule Hill, I'd seen him in West Wing and Psyched and all those things, but what really caught my eye was that he loves to tap dance. So we talked about that, and I think anytime you can ask some, it's really tough if you've ever been on one of those press junkets where, the stars and directors come out and every 15 minutes do the same interview with somebody else, it's like the time you ask them that question that's fresh, it brings out so much easier for them to answer.
I mean, have any of the people that you photographed subsequently become friends?
Actually, a number of them have. You know, a lot of times it's like you don't overstate that. I mean, you know, it's like if we're best friends for that, you know, half an hour that we're together, I'm content that we had a half hour. But a number of them have actually, usually like the second or third time you see somebody, it's kind of it breaks the ice, and it's just that much easier. We photographed Serena Williams and Venus since they were 13 and 14 years old. And so it's fun going back. It's like Serena never recognizes me, but she recognizes my wife right away. And it's like, oh, I know you guys, you shot that picture when we were kids. So it just makes it, in a way, it's not overstating the relationship, but the fact that they know you and trust you and are at ease. You don't have to establish that.
So I presume, actually, I mean, the implication there is that's not necessarily always the norm in a celebrity's experience of working with photographers. I mean, what do you think the biggest mistakes people make are?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and actually this is one of the things that I learned when we did the Art and Soul book, because I photographed, the book has 123 people in it, but we photographed way more than that. So it was one of those things that it was almost like speed dating portrait photography, where we had a very limited time with people. And I realized that I may not be doing the definitive portrait of them, but I had a chance to capture how they were feeling that particular day. And, you know, it was going to be the best image we could make out of those 15 minutes. And that actually made me relax a lot more. And, you know, it's so much easier now to go with the flow, where, you know, you want to go in with a game plan, but you also have to be, you know, just like being a photojournalist, you have to be loose enough that if something better presents itself, you don't have the blinders on and go, no, we're going this direction. When you notice it's like, wow, that would actually be a much better way to go.
And you've made a successful and long career now in what is an increasingly crowded field. I mean, how do you differentiate your work at this point?
I think, like, in a way, I think a lot of photographers are, you know, looking for a hook or a style or a technique to be known for. And I think, you know, sometimes that you can go too far down that road, where you're the guy who shoots on this particular canvas, or you really do type portraits. And I've never really tried to have a particular style. Now, I might do something for a project of images where I want a group of images to hold together and work together. But I think, if anything, it's not having a particular look and just knowing that, you know, I'll have fun with the shoot, and hopefully the people I photograph do as well.
I think a lot of people out there would love to do what you do. I mean, could you just give us some really, really quick tips? A lot of people think that you need to have a lot of expensive equipment, studio space, and everything else. I mean, what's the minimum that you think that someone needs to?
Well, I think that's a great question, because I think sometimes people look at lighting diagrams and think, oh, it's like I've got to have this huge setup, and it's like 90% of the time, or every time, for me, it really starts with the key light, and I may fill. Or, you know, if the key by itself is just the look that I want, that may be where we stop. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of people make, is in terms of thinking you've got to have tons and tons of gear. You know, I would say, you know, have one light, really learn everything you can possibly do. And the same thing with the modifier. I really don't take a lot of modifiers. It's like maybe a big 6-foot Octabank, 22-inch beauty dish, and a, you know, small zoom reflector is really all I take, but you need to know what you can get out of each one. So I think really getting to know the gear, you know, sort of like a musician, like knowing what your instrument can produce, getting to know that you don't need to have a ton of stuff. You certainly these days don't need to own a studio. It's like 90% of the time I'm going where the subjects want me. You know, and if you're in New York City, like, no editorial photographers can afford studios these days, so you rent for the shoot, you know, and even if you own one and the studio's downtown, but they need the shoot to happen at Midtown, it's like they're not coming to you. Most of the time you're going to them.
So I mean, we can't all, unfortunately, we can't all photograph Anne Hathaway and
yeah,
George
well, that
Clooney.
is unfortunate because those are the fun days.
But for people who just want to take better pictures of their loved ones and their
Yeah.
friends, I mean, what are some? Can you just give us some really, really quick tips of do's and don'ts?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the biggest thing we've already talked about is like getting them comfortable. You know, get them in a position where they're feeling good about stuff. And if people hate to be photographed, and this actually happens with a lot of celebrities, anything you can do to take their mind off the process of photography and onto something that they love to do is great. So it's like, you know, if you're photographing your kids and they love to play soccer or something like that, why not do a portrait of them out on the soccer field with a ball and see what you can do, and, you know, give them the full World Cup soccer star treatment. You know, you've got that opportunity to make them feel special. I'd also say, like, pay as much attention to the background as you do the person in front, because it's like a lot of times it's that background, whether it's clean and simple that really makes the subject pop, or something that's got a storytelling element to it, makes all the difference in the world.
So if you're on, I'm going to ask you, this is a difficult question, I realize. Every photographer I speak to seems to have one lens.
Yeah.
It's like 90% of my work's done this one lens. If I just
Yeah.
had that one lens, I'd be fine. Doesn't need to be a specific lens, but what focal length is the one that is just
Yeah.
the go-to for you?
Well, no, it's that's absolutely the case, and that's some of the times you see on the forums. It's people with their gear list of, you know, like 600 lenses. I could do at least 90%, maybe 95% of what I shoot with the 24-70. And
That's cheating, because that's several
yeah,
focal lengths.
it's several focal lengths, but it is one lens, Barney, and you did say one lens. Because really for portrait photography, it does the whole gamut from, if I want a wide expanse behind the subject, I may be shooting a horizontal shot at 24 millimeter, and keeping the camera pretty much perpendicular to the ground, so it's pretty flat field. And then coming in for a half body portrait, I tend to shoot in maybe the, you know, 45, 50 millimeter range. And then actually my favorite focal length and the lens that I used for the Anne Hathaway portrait is that 24-70 at 70 millimeters. And it just, like, instead of standing back and sort of shouting direction to the subject, we're, you know, just like this, we're having an intimate conversation, and I can, you know, almost whisper to my subject what I want them to do. It's just, it's to me, it's like a beautiful focal length, because it flattens the face up just enough that you don't have, the perspective looks good, yet it adds an air of intimacy.
So we have a little bit of time left. I have two final questions. The first is, you've had a long career at this point. And what is the hardest lesson you've learned in that time?
I think the toughest thing to remember, and actually one of the things we're going to talk on a panel today, is, you know, it all, like, particular on assignment photography, it's like ultimately all the excuses that can happen, it all falls down on the photographer to begin with. So if you see a great opportunity, you can't pass it up. You know, you can't go, oh gee, it's like, this would be great if we could do it. Just do it right then and there, because, you know, with a lot of people that I shoot, there really are no reshoots, and if you're not making that connection, you know, it could be that the subject's having a bad day, but it's always your job to turn that around. So I think that's probably the biggest thing in terms of, you know, always walk away with a shot that you're proud of, even if it wasn't on the list of shots that you were supposed to do. It's some of them, you know, I've had cover shoots that were only a cover because at the end of it I was like, I don't like anything that I was asked to shoot. Let's do one more shot, and, you know, that's just for me, and then it ends up being like just for me and the cover of the magazine. So always walk away with a picture you're proud of.
And what are you most proud of at this point in your career?
Probably the wide variety of subject matter that I've been able to shoot. It's like I've been very lucky to drop into the lives of so many different people. And to me, it's as interesting to photograph a major Hollywood celebrity as to, be shooting in Haiti or something and capturing the lives of people there. It's a great opportunity to tell people stories, and if at the end of the day that's what I did, that's good enough for me.
All right, well, Brian Smith, thank you so much for
Thank you,
joining us.
Barney.
It was a lot of fun talking to you, and thank you everyone for watching.
All right, thanks guys.